Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that's incredibly important but often overlooked: the air we breathe.
Hmm.
And get this, it's not just about what's outside. We're talking about the air inside our homes, our offices, even our schools. It all affects our brain power, our productivity, even our sleep.
It's true, and it's amazing how much we underestimate that impact.
Yeah.
We tend to think of air quality as an outdoor problem, right?
Yeah, smog, pollution, all that.
Exactly. But the reality is, the air inside can be just as important, if not more so,
Yeah.
for how our brains function.
That's a great point. I mean, think about it. We spend what, like 90% of our lives indoors?
Something like that, yeah.
So it makes sense that indoor air quality would have a huge effect on our well-being.
Absolutely.
Now, for this deep dive, we've got two great sources to work with.
Okay.
There's this research-heavy video that gets into the nitty-gritty of CO2 and pollution. And then we have an article from the World Economic Forum that looks at the economic side of things, the impact of all this on, businesses and productivity.
The big picture stuff.
Exactly. So let's start with the CO2 problem. Now, imagine your brain only working at like 60%, 50% of its capacity.
Oh, wow.
That's what high CO2 levels can do.
It's true. You start feeling mentally sluggish, can't focus, even remembering things becomes harder.
Ugh. Yeah, I've totally had those brain fog moments.
Right.
More times than I can count. I always thought it was just stress or not enough sleep.
Sure.
But are you saying it could actually be the air?
It absolutely could be. You see, our brains evolved in environments with way lower CO2 than what we have in modern buildings.
Huh, interesting.
And the research is clear. Even a small increase in CO2 can really mess with our thinking.
Wow. Like, how small are we talking?
Well, one study found that increasing CO2 levels by just 200 parts per million, that led to a 60% decrease in productivity.
60%? That's insane. Like, that's a huge chunk of the workday just gone.
It really is. And it's not just offices either.
Yeah. Where else does this apply?
Think about classrooms, students trying to learn in a stuffy room,
Mm-hmm.
or people working from home, maybe not ventilating their spaces properly.
So it really is everywhere, huh?
It is. The impact on focus, creativity, all of that can be huge.
This is making me rethink my whole home setup. It's like we're all living in these little toxic bubbles.
Well, yeah, in a way. Especially if we're not paying attention to the air.
Okay. But the good news is there are things we can do about it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot we can do to improve our indoor air quality.
Okay, so before we get to those solutions, I think we need to understand the full scope of this problem.
Yeah, good point.
It's not just CO2, right? There are other things in the air that can affect us.
Exactly. Now, that World Economic Forum article you mentioned?
Yeah.
It highlighted the dangers of these tiny particles called PM 2.5.
PM 2.5.
Yeah. They're so small, they can actually get deep into your lungs.
Oh, wow.
And even cross into your bloodstream.
So it's like inhaling like microscopic toxins?
Pretty much, yeah. And here's the scary part. Only 12% of cities worldwide meet the air quality standards set by, international organizations.
That's crazy. So most of us are breathing air that could be messing with our brains.
It's a real concern.
Yeah.
And even short-term exposure can have a negative effect.
Wow. So what kind of damage are we talking?
Well, research shows that younger adults, they seem to be hit the hardest.
Really?
Yeah, they could experience a cognitive decline that's the same as aging 15 years.
15 years. That's a lot. Imagine being like in your 20s, but having the brain of someone in their 40s.
It's a scary thought, and it particularly affects memory.
Oh, man. So jobs that require a good memory, like doctors, lawyers.
Right, or even students studying for exams.
Yeah, they're all at a disadvantage.
Exactly.
This is really eye-opening. We talked earlier about Australia having pretty good air quality overall.
Right.
But what about those bushfires they had a few years back?
Oh, yeah, those were devastating. The World Economic Forum article actually mentioned that. Millions of Australians were suddenly exposed to some of the worst air pollution in the world.
Wow. So even in places with good air quality, things can change in an instant.
That's right. It's a reminder that we're all vulnerable.
So the air we breathe, it's clearly more impactful than we realize. But the good news is there are things we can do about it, right?
Absolutely. There are ways to mitigate these risks and create healthier environments.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are these solutions?
Well, first off, good old-fashioned ventilation is key.
Okay.
Just opening your windows, even for a short time, can make a big difference in CO2 levels.
That seems so simple.
It is, but people forget to do it, especially when it's cold outside.
You're telling me my windows are sealed shut all winter.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe that's something to rethink.
Yeah, you might be right. What else can we do?
Another powerful tool: HEP filters.
HEPA filters.
Yeah, they're designed to capture those tiny PM 2.5 particles we talked about.
Oh, right. The nasty little ones.
Exactly. Actually, the host of that video we mentioned, they actually show the HEPA filter they use. It's a Xiaomi model.
Interesting.
But one thing to keep in mind, not all HEPA filters are created equal.
So what should we look for?
Look for a filter with a reliable certification. Something like the AHAM Verified program in the US.
Okay, AHAM verified. Got it.
It might cost a bit more, but those certifications mean the filter has been properly tested.
So it actually does what it says it does.
Exactly. You want to make sure it's actually removing those particles.
So certified HEPA filters are a must-have. What about where we put them in a room? Does that matter?
Placement can make a big difference. Ideally, you want it somewhere where it can draw in air from the breathing zone.
The breathing zone.
Yeah, like where people spend most of their time.
So like in the living room, maybe near the couch?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or in the bedroom, maybe near the bed.
Makes sense. So strategic placement is key.
It is. You want to maximize airflow and make sure the filter is actually catching those pollutants where you're breathing.
Got it. Now, what about maintenance? Do you have to clean these things?
Yes. HEPA filters need to be replaced regularly. The manufacturer will tell you how often,
Okay.
and a clogged filter won't be as effective, obviously.
Right. So choose a certified HEPA filter, place it right, keep it clean.
You got it.
Okay, check, check, check. What else can we do to improve our indoor environment? Like, aside from filters.
Well, believe it or not, even furniture can play a role in air quality.
Really? My couch is affecting the air.
Well, furniture can block airflow, you see,
Oh, okay.
and that creates stagnant areas where pollutants can build up.
Huh. And this is especially important in the bedroom, right? Where we sleep.
Exactly. We spend a lot of time there.
So rearranging the furniture for better airflow, that's going on my to-do list.
Good idea. And another thing to think about is temperature and humidity.
Okay.
Keeping your home within the optimal ranges can actually help minimize harmful emissions from your furniture and electronics.
Okay, wait. Why does temperature matter for air quality?
Well, a lot of materials like furniture, electronics, even building materials,
Yeah.
they release more of these things called volatile organic compounds at higher temperatures.
Volatile or organic compounds, what are those?
They're basically chemicals that can impact our health and our brain function.
So even my furniture is emitting chemicals into the air.
Unfortunately, yes. It's something we don't often think about, but a lot of everyday items in our homes release these VOCs.
Wow, okay. And this gets worse at higher temperatures.
Exactly.
Okay, now I see how everything is connected. The air, the temperature, even the furniture.
It's all part of the same ecosystem.
It is.
But-
But you know what? The transcript mentioned these VOCs, but I'm still not totally clear on what they are.
Oh, sure. So VOCs, they're a big group of chemicals that can be found in a lot of common household products. Things like paints, varnishes, even cleaning supplies.
Okay, so like everyday stuff.
Yeah. And some of them can have negative health effects. You know, things like eye irritation, headaches, even more serious problems with your liver or kidneys.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So it's not just about feeling stuffy or having a foggy brain. These things can actually make you sick.
Right. And the tricky part is that VOCs can be found in so many products, so you have to be aware of the sources.
And try to minimize our exposure.
Exactly.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. What can we do about these VOCs?
Well, one of the simplest things is to choose low VOC or no VOC products whenever you can.
Like low VOC paint.
Exactly. There are a lot of options out there now.
So read the labels, do your research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what about the furniture you already have?
Yeah, what about that?
Good ventilation can help. Just opening windows regularly can really help flush out those chemicals.
Right.
And those HEPA filters we talked about, they can also help capture some VOCs.
Okay, so those are still good to have.
Definitely. And remember, HEPA filters are more effective at removing those tiny particles.
Got it. So ventilation, HEPA filters, and choosing low VOC products. Check, check, check.
Got it.
Now, what about humidity? You mentioned that earlier. How does that play into all of this?
Yeah, humidity is important because if it's too high, it can encourage mold and mildew to grow.
Oh, yucks.
And those release spores into the air, which can trigger allergies and breathing problems.
Okay, so we need to find that sweet spot. Not too hot, not too humid.
Exactly. It's about balance.
It is. This is a lot to take in. I feel like we've only scratched the surface here.
We have.
Yeah.
There's so much more to learn about air quality and how it affects us.
Well, before we go any further, let's just do a quick recap of what we've covered so far.
Okay, sounds good.
So we started with CO2 and how it can mess with our thinking.
Right.
Then we got into those PM 2.5 particles, the tiny ones that can get into your lungs.
And we talk about HEPA filters, choosing the right ones, placing them strategically.
And then we got into furniture, temperature, humidity, even these VOCs.
It's all connected.
It is. And you know what? We haven't even touched on sick building syndrome yet.
Right.
I think that deserves its own segment.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big one.
So listeners, get ready for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll unravel the mysteries of sick building syndrome and explore even more ways to improve your indoor environment.
Sounds good. So ready to dive into sick building syndrome?
Yeah, let's do it. You know, you mentioned earlier it affects something like a quarter of people who work indoors.
It's a lot, yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm not really sure what it is. What exactly is sick building syndrome?
Well, it's not really one specific illness.
Okay.
It's more like a bunch of symptoms people get when they're in certain buildings.
Like what kind of symptoms?
Headaches, fatigue, eye irritation, trouble concentrating, that sort of thing.
That sounds pretty general.
It is, yeah.
So how do you know if it's sick building syndrome or just like a bad day?
That's the tricky part. The symptoms are often pretty vague, and they could be from other things too.
Right.
But one big clue is if the symptoms go away when you leave the building.
So like if you feel better as soon as you step outside.
Exactly. That's a red flag.
Yeah.
And if lots of people in the same building are having similar problems,
Yeah.
that's even more of a sign that something's up with the building itself.
This is making me think about all those times I felt totally drained after a long day at work.
Uh-huh.
I always just figured it was stress or whatever.
Right.
But maybe it was the building the whole time.
It's possible. There are a lot of things that can cause sick building syndrome.
Like what?
Core ventilation is a big one. If the air isn't circulating properly, pollutants can build up.
Right. We talked about CO2 and those PM 2.5 particles earlier.
Yeah, those are definitely factors.
Are there other things too?
Oh, yeah. There's another sneaky culprit. Furniture fumes.
Furniture fumes? What do you mean?
Well, a lot of building materials and furniture, especially newer stuff, they release chemicals into the air.
Even if it's like eco-friendly or whatever.
Even then, yeah. One of the worst offenders is formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde. That sounds familiar.
It's used in a lot of pressed wood products.
Oh, right. Like particle board and stuff.
Exactly. And the problem is, it can off-gas for years.
Off gas, so it's constantly releasing these chemicals.
Pretty much, yeah. And formaldehyde, it can cause all sorts of problems, from eye irritation to headaches, even trouble breathing.
Isn't formaldehyde the stuff they use to preserve, like, specimens in labs?
It is, yeah. And it's more common in our homes and offices than we realize.
Okay, now I'm getting a little freaked out. It sounds like even if we're doing everything right, ventilating, using filters, we could still be exposed to these chemicals from our furniture.
It's a valid concern. It's not easy to completely avoid these substances, but the first step is just being aware of them.
So what can we do?
When you're buying furniture, try to look for pieces made with solid wood or materials that are certified as low emission.
Are there, like, labels or something to look for?
Yeah, there are a few. GreenGuard and CARB Phase 2 are two good ones.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out for those. What about older furniture? I have some vintage pieces in my apartment.
Older furniture is less likely to be off-gassing a lot of formaldehyde, but it can still have other pollutants like dust mites and mold.
Especially if it hasn't been cleaned properly.
Exactly.
So regular cleaning is important no matter what.
Absolutely. Vacuuming, dusting, cleaning upholstery, it all helps.
Okay, so we've got ventilation, HEPA filters, choosing low-emission furniture, and regular cleaning. Anything else we can do to fight back against sick building syndrome?
Well, like we talked about earlier, controlling temperature and humidity is important.
Right.
Keeping things moderate can help minimize VOCs and prevent mold.
So it all ties back to creating that balanced indoor environment we were talking about.
It does. And there's one more piece of the puzzle that often gets overlooked. Personal responsibility.
Personal responsibility? What do you mean?
I mean, we all have a role to play in keeping our indoor spaces healthy.
Okay.
It's about being mindful of our own habits and making choices that support clean air.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Things like using non-toxic cleaning products, avoiding air fresheners, even taking your shoes off when you come inside can make a difference.
Interesting.
It's about being aware of the things that can pollute the air and taking steps to minimize them.
I like that. So it's a combination of individual actions and bigger systemic changes that are needed.
Exactly. We need people to be proactive, but we also need building codes and regulations that prioritize indoor air quality.
It makes you wonder why indoor air quality isn't a bigger deal, especially in places like workplaces and schools.
It's a complex issue. There's lack of awareness, a focus on saving money,
Right.
and sometimes people just don't want to admit there's a problem.
It's like we're so worried about climate change and pollution outside that we've forgotten about the air we're breathing right now.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But the good news is things are starting to change.
Oh, really?
There's more research coming out about the impact of indoor air quality, and people are starting to pay attention.
That's good to hear. So we've got the knowledge, we've got the solutions. What's next?
The next step is action. It's about taking what we've learned and actually doing something with it.
Making changes in our own lives and pushing for change on a larger scale.
Exactly.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this information.
I know what you mean.
But honestly, I'm feeling kind of empowered.
That's the spirit.
The more we know about the air we breathe, the more control we have over our health.
I completely agree. Knowledge is power.
It is. So, just to recap quickly, we've learned that sick building syndrome is a real thing.
With real consequences.
But we've also learned that there are things we can do to protect ourselves.
Choosing the right furniture, being mindful of our habits, it all adds up.
And we need to push for better standards in buildings and workplaces.
Absolutely. Indoor air quality should be a priority.
It should be. Now, before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, activated carbon filters.
Oh, yeah.
You said those are especially good at removing those VOCs.
They are. Activated carbon is really good at trapping certain gases and chemicals.
So like those VOCs that are coming off our furniture.
Exactly. It's like a sponge for bad air.
I like that analogy. So, if we're concerned about VOCs, should we be using activated carbon filters along with our HEPA filters?
It depends. HEPA filters are mainly for particles, while activated carbon targets gases and chemicals. For the best protection, it's a good idea to use both.
So it's about layering those strategies.
That's a good way to put it. You're building a shield of clean air.
I love it. We've covered so much ground today. Are there any other air quality solutions out there that you think people should know about?
Oh, there's a ton of cool stuff being developed. Air purifiers that use UV light to kill bacteria, smart sensors that monitor air quality in real time.
So the future of clean air is high-tech.
It is, yeah. And as these technologies become more affordable, we'll have even more options to create healthy spaces.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm seeing the air around me in a whole new way.
That's great to hear. Awareness is the first step.
It is. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing the stuffy rooms, the weird smells.
And once you're aware, you can start taking action.
Absolutely. Making changes in your own life, talking to people about it, pushing for a future where clean air is just normal.
Love that. That's what it's all about.
This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, listeners, knowledge is power. The more you know about the air you breathe, the healthier you can be.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, breathe deep, breathe well, and breathe easy. It's amazing, isn't it? We've spent all this time talking about air, something we usually don't even think about.
It's true. We take it for granted, but it's so fundamental to everything.
And what I'm realizing is that it's not just about breathing. It's about how the air we breathe shapes our entire experience.
Absolutely. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we perform.
And it's not just about individuals either. This has implications for society as a whole.
Oh, yeah, huge implications. Think about it. Cleaner air means people can think more clearly.
Right.
They're healthier, they're more productive.
It's like a ripple effect.
It is. Imagine a world where every classroom, every office, every home had clean, fresh air.
Oh, man.
Kids could focus better in school.
Yeah.
People would be more creative at work.
And we'd all sleep better at night.
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? And it all starts with recognizing that clean air is a right, not a privilege.
It should be. And it starts with each of us taking responsibility for the air we breathe.
Exactly. We need to be informed consumers, demand better standards from our workplaces, and advocate for policies that prioritize clean air for everyone.
Sometimes it feels like these big problems are just too big to solve.
I know what you mean.
But what I'm learning from this deep dive is that even small actions can make a difference.
They absolutely do. Every little bit helps.
Choosing a low VOC paint, opening a window for a few minutes, even just talking to your friends and family about air quality.
It all adds up. The more people who are aware of this issue, the more we can push for change.
This has been a real call to action for me. I'm inspired to make changes in my own life and to spread the word.
That's great to hear. It's contagious, that passion for clean air.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I want people to realize that they have more power than they think. We're not helpless victims of our environment.
We can take control.
We have the knowledge, we have the tools, and we have the power to make a difference.
And it all starts with awareness.
Exactly. Once you start paying attention to the air you breathe, you can't unsee it.
You start noticing those stuffy rooms, the lingering smells, those little signs that something's not quite right.
And then you can start taking action, making those small changes, having those conversations, working towards a future where clean air is the norm.
That's a future I want to live in.
Me too. And it's a future we can create together.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for guiding us through this topic.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
And listeners, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about the air you breathe, the healthier and happier you can be.
And that's what it's all about.
Until next time, breathe deep, breathe well, and breathe easy.